Howdy, we're here to talk about maps today, and the one we're going to be starting with in terms of all of this is a map that and I initially thought was a little boring, but as I looked into it, I found a lot of interesting things. So let's talk about maps. So, what we've got here is an absolutely beautiful 1839 map of Australia. So, the reason this map is interesting has a lot to do with Australian history, right? So, the maps, publishing and editing isn't particularly crazy. It's the Society for the Diffusion of Useful Knowledge, which is sort of an educational society in the British colonial era that was like sharing stuff like that. But the fun thing about this map is the colonies. So we've got labeled the colony of West Australia, colony of South Australia, New South Wales, everybody's favorite bizarrely named place, and the colony of North Australia, established 1838. So the crazy thing about this is, first of all, no line dividing these. The only thing that's sort of highlighted is South Australia here, which had been carved out, but clearly the lines between this area and this area weren't really established. North Australia also never really existed. There was a 1846 version of Australia that was created later on, but at this point, all this was a military base that actually failed within a few years. So there's really nothing going on here, but it's labeled as that, and that's part of the reason we don't see the lines drawn. Van Diemen's Land, aka Tasmania, is also labeled here. So we can see the years each of these was carved out, but clearly they haven't really established where all the territorial boundaries are. West Australia was just renamed in the last couple of years at this point from the Swan River colony, and the only place that we really see very much like detailed inland mapping of any sort is over here. So Europeans had really only explored there. Okay, just to cover the territorial evolution of Australia in the 19th century, starts out with just New South Wales, which gradually expands westward. Start another colony on the other side, Swan River, then Western Australia. And now, the time we're at now, they carve out South Australia, but still there's a lot of uncertainty about where's what. They move around the borders. And again, they're trying to establish something. North fails, goes back to New South Wales. And then again, New South Wales stays in the north, but they carve out Queensland out of that northern area. South Australia expands to take it over. And finally, we get to almost today when we get close to the modern shape of Australia. But you will notice the thing missing is Northern Territory of Australia today, which is the continued thorn in the side of the territorial evolution of Australia, that unresolved thing to do with that northern chunk up there that's just so inhospitable and so filled with crocodiles. So the last thing we want to highlight here that's the most interesting to me is these gaps along this coast. So there are places that haven't been fully explored, and this was the last area of Australia to really get mapped from the ocean or by Europeans in general. And this area actually lines up with a really crazy theory that was just being disproven at that time, which is the legend of the inland sea of Australia. This area is where explorer Thomas J. Malleson of the East India Company theorized that there was a delta to an inland sea. A lot of this was just, speculative, get people excited about investing in places like this. That's why they did things like this a lot. But the idea was all these rivers here might have ended in a big delta that connected into an inland sea, something like the Nile or the Amazon or the Mississippi. People saw this big continent and had a lot of hopium that something would be there. Of course, we now know it wasn't. But, when I see these gaps on this map here, I can't help but think that on some level, the cartographers of this era were leaving a little bit of space for the possibility of something like that existing, even though, most people at this point had concluded it did not. But yeah, gotta have the hope, right? So, of the three maps you're seeing here demonstrating this, I think they're derived from Malson's speculation. I'm not sure if any of them are actually made by him or of their provenance, but they're really just to show that this is something people were talking about at this time and were putting on maps. The Society for Useful Knowledge 1839 map of Australia is a really interesting map for these reasons, despite initially appearing not to have that much of a story to it. But that's the cool thing about old maps, right? Every detail has an enormous amount of history behind it that we can analyze. It takes us inside the cartographers or inside the history, inside in this case, the territorial evolution and myth making of Australia. So hopefully you tune in next time for more information about historic maps and what they can teach us today. Thanks, everyone.